Hello and welcome to the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. My name's Tony Patty, and joining me today are three very astute professionals in their own right: Prash Kotecha, Ush Danak, and also Vinay Tanna as well. I'll tell you all about them in just a few moments' time. And today's session is all about workplace calmness. Having a healthy workplace well-being is key to promoting a positive workplace and health culture, of course, improving the health of your attitude at work, to work even, increasing productivity and reducing absenteeism. So why is it so important to ensure to take the benefits from the schemes which are available to us? How do we find out about these schemes? And what sort of help can we get from the resources which are available to us, such as the three people we're about to speak with in a moment? And also understanding what's available and making time for us. So joining us today is Prash Kotecha, who is part of Wellbeing, peak performance and leadership consultant called stresstosuccess.co. Now, Prash is an international wellbeing and leadership consultant, speaker and CEO of Stress to Success. And he brings 25 plus years of personal and corporate wellbeing, peak performance, stress management and leadership experience behind him. We also have Usha Danak, who's the founder of EQ Academy. Now, Ush Danak is one of Australia's leading experts on emotional intelligence, EQ coach and trainer, and a popular keynote speaker at events around the world. And she's also the founder and CEO of Emotional Quotient, EQ Academy, the online hub for emotional intelligence courses in Australia. And we also have Vinay Tanna, who's the managing partner at Garner and Hancock Solicitors and Notaries. Now, Vinay Tanna is a solicitor and notary public. He's been a litigator for over 20 years and has advised clients on their personal wealth protection strategies and more. Now, he specializes in family and inheritance disputes with special interest in those with assets in India and elsewhere in the world. He's also a specialist in the knowledge of prenuptial agreements and has written a book guiding couples on this sensitive subject as well. So these great astute professionals join us today. A very warm welcome to you, Prash, Ush, and also Vinay as well. Thank you for joining us here on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show.
Pleasure to be here, Tony, with such caring and expert professionals in this field on a subject that I think that impacts everybody wherever they are in the world, and whether they're self-employed, business owners or employees, it's relevant.
Indeed. We'll kick off with you then, Prash. Can you explain to us the landscape of the work industry, especially since this pandemic? COVID has hit everybody in different ways, through illness, to job losses, to working from home. And the whole stressful side of it becomes quite deceitful within our own minds, and we tend to lock ourselves away. So how can you explain the landscape of the work industry, especially during these times that we're in right now?
There are three factors, Tony, that I think will come up time and time again. I know Ush sees those as well. I'm sure she'll speak to them. Number one, because of this pandemic, the matter of people's personal, mental and physical health has shot up the importance list. It's right up there as a top priority. And now more than ever during this climate, people's personal and physical wellness is playing a much more important part in their ability to perform at work or the results that they get. So that's a major shift. People used to take it for granted, now it's changed. Secondly, it's the method by which we work. We're now looking at a landscape where people are working from home. Obviously now we're moving into a trend about hybrid working. We'll talk about that in a bit. But really the way that people conduct their business and the way teams come together has shifted significantly. And then thirdly, it's the way that it's the dynamics of how that's playing out. People are needing to shift the way their approach to work has had to change. Their approach to team dynamics has had to change, and some of them, their approach to what they do as a business has had to change as well. So these are some of the significant changes, and they have major impacts on people's mental and physical wellness. And then that's a symbiotic cycle or a negative spiral.
Ush Danak joining us from Australia today, founder of EQ Academy. Ush, elaborate on what Prash just said to us, if you would, and go into slightly more detail from your perspective and your experience of being in the field.
Yeah, look, I just want to touch on Prash's point about that hybrid model. I think, the EQ part of that is really the self-awareness piece. So when do you have your work hat on? When do you have your home hat on, whether that's mum, dad, carer, and how do you distinguish between them? And I think, if you're not able to have that level of self-awareness, then you are going to experience a level of burnout, which is also going to impact not only work, but home life too.
Vinay Tanner, managing partner of Gardner and Hancock Solicitors and Notaries. Vinay, from a perspective of what Ush just shared with us and what Prash was saying, does the notion of work-life balance now go completely out the door? Because we've heard so much about that over the decades, work-life balance, work-life balance. Now we're working from home, and there's a whole new perspective and psychology behind this. What's your take on that?
So employers obviously are there to look after you. There's an implied duty for all employers to make sure that the health and safety of their employees is paramount. And there is, both speakers have talked about this blurring of lines between home life and work life. And of course, you have this overlap between working from home and being at home. So what you're getting is this disparity between what is work and what is home life. And the employers have a duty, a positive duty, to make sure that blurred line is cleared. And more importantly, for them to make sure that you are safe where you're working. And I don't mean falling over a chair. I'm talking about serious falling over a chair mentally. And that can hurt you probably more than the physical injury. So I think that people are beginning to understand that there is an enormous amount of obligation that the employers have, which they cannot simply distance themselves from because they're working from home.
Here's an interesting scenario for all three of you. Children working from home and not going to school are missing out on social interaction skills. Does that same thing apply for employees of firms and companies where they're working from home, not having the intimate interaction with their work colleagues and friends? They may be restricted in learning new things and new skills. Perhaps you're in the middle of an apprenticeship and you've been furloughed and you're at home. Where does that come in all of this, guys?
I think that's Zoom fatigue, isn't it, really? I think loads of businesses are doing a lot to keep that interaction going. But I know the feedback we're getting is that they're tired, to be honest, of, the next thing, the next virtual drink, the next virtual lunch. I think we need to empower employees, whether that's by, wellness credits or, wellness sort of surprises, that we give them the freedom to choose what works for them. And again, it's empowering them, right, as opposed to trying to enforce what the business needs when they're not actually in the business environment.
Vinay, is it here to stay, and is it more acceptable to work from home now? And Prash, I'm going to ask you to respond to that in just a moment as well, as soon as Vinay's finished speaking. Working from home, so, where do we stand with that right now?
So I've noticed a lot of corporates, they've decided on a model that is now changed. They want to incorporate home working because that's what is led by employees. But what they've got to be careful about is to balance that need of the employers and also inadvertently the need of the employees. So a lot of models have been created, like, for example, the 2-2-1 model. So, for example, 2 days actually in the office, everyone in the office together to create a collegiate atmosphere, to make sure that people are talking to each other physically face to face. 2 days flexible so that you have that flexibility, and 1 day off. And the reason for this is to create that balance that we've all been craving for. And I've noticed that there's been initially a mistrust by employers, but people working from home, that mistrust has gone. There is an enormous amount of data which shows that employees work very hard, indeed go beyond their duty working from home. They will avoid lunch breaks, they will miss breaks, they will miss any type of leisure to be able to fit in the full day. So I can see that the employer's mental block of people working from home has gone. But there are warning signs, and my co-speakers will talk about the dangers.
Prash.
There are warning signs. Vinay's absolutely on point. And those warning signs are when people start to disengage, often sometimes referred to as presenteeism. They're there, but they're not there. They're kind of working, but they're kind of not working. And this is on the rise now more than any time previously in known history. Along with that is its other unwanted cousin, absenteeism. People who are just unable to turn up and show up because they're physically or mentally just not there, or they've got too much going on the outside. This is a sign, as Ush rightly pointed out, of the need for that fiduciary duty of care, that obligation that employers have to be able to be more empathetic and be more aware of these things starting to transpire. And yes, hybrid working is helpful. Approaches like 221 are helpful. But side by side with that, there needs to be a little bit more opening up. I think the call, and Ush and I, look, both Ush and I, we have our teams, many of our teams are working from home. We work with many of our corporate and small business clients. They have staff working from home. And one of the common challenges that they have is, hey, these guys are still not showing up. What's going on? Well, when we ask a little more and we dig a little further, Tony, what we discover is that every conversation, every Zoom call, every meeting is all to do with work. There's nothing really going on that allows these individuals who are furloughed, right? Or they're not furloughed, they're working from home and they've forgotten the work-life balancing. There's no outlet for them to come together and rant and just talk about life and to talk about stuff other than work. And I think that's a missing piece that we found time and time again. So for empathy and open-mindedness to create those forums where employees can come together on non-work stuff, shoot the breezes, I guess we call it, is a powerful tool along with the other strategies to start to address that challenge.
So interesting. Ush, in your head of HR roles that you have and have had over the period of time, it's important to understand that employees need to be seen. Employees need to be able to prove their worth and show, look, I'm doing a really great job here, so I'm really worthy of that next promotion or pay rise that's going to be coming up in the company. These things, perhaps in my mind, get overlooked because when you're working from home, you can't actually see the substantial efforts that the employee is making and trying to prove himself or herself to people, saying, look, I really am good for this job and I'm worthy of that promotion and pay rise. So understanding from an HR perspective, the employee entitlement as a basic perhaps doesn't exist anymore from home working. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm gonna flip that actually and say that I think, from a HR point of view, we need to educate leaders to build trust, right? So a lot of these leaders, they've been thrown into this pandemic where they've not actually had, the training or the experience to manage remotely. So I think rather than put the onus or the burden on employees to prove their worth, I think we need to flip it on its head and get these leaders trained and actually support them, because otherwise we're failing them. And I don't think that's right either. And I think secondly, there's a viral thing that's gone around just today in Australia that a lot of businesses are now asking their employees to come back to work. And the employees are saying, hang on a minute, you told us to go home, you slashed our pays to help you get through COVID, and now we want flexibility. You're saying we can't have it. So again, we need to educate the leaders to go, how do we have that thing where, are we calling them in just because we need to see our employees, or should the focus be on building trust?
Very interesting. This is the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. My name's Tony Patty, and today we are talking about many subjects, but workplace calmness is the title of our subject today. And we're talking with today Prash Kotecha, who is from stresstosuccess.co, Ush Danak, founder of EQ Academy, and Vinay Tanna, who's managing partner of Garner and Hancock Solicitors and Notaries as well. Ush, if I may continue with what you said about flipping the whole thing around where and something news just come out in Australia, is it something that's already caught on in the rest of the world? And perhaps, Prash, you can pick up on this in a moment as well.
Yeah, look, I think, this article that came out was from a very famous tech company that are now forcing their employees to come back to work. So again, I think we need businesses to challenge the reason, why do they want people to come back to work? Is it because they don't know how to manage remotely, or do they need to do what Vinay said and have a bit of a hybrid 2-2-1 approach? So I think that conversation needs to happen, but I don't think it's right putting the burden on employees to prove their worth.
Prash.
I absolutely agree with everything that Ush said, actually. And, Ush and I have been working with clients over the past year during the pandemic, supporting corporate clients, small businesses, global clients. And one of the two key themes that keep coming up are psychological safety and vulnerability and compassion. Let me go through both of those. Psychological safety is that space where employees feel safe enough to be able to voice their feelings, to express their concerns, and to perform in a way that they feel that they're being appreciated and safe enough that they're not going to be judged. So psychological safety is huge. A lot of teams, since they've now been suddenly thrown into this distributed, decentralized model where everybody's working from home have lost that psychological safety. It needs to be rebuilt. The onus therefore comes back to the leaders, and side by side leaders need to have and exhibit so that their downlines also start to adopt it, right? Yad yad ajarati shrestha, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita. Whatever action a great person performs, others will follow. That was 5,500 years ago, and here we are. It's still relevant today, Krishna's advice. Leaders at the top need to be able to exhibit vulnerability and compassion. That is to say, they need to show that they themselves sometimes don't make it happen. When they show that they don't wear a steel suit, that they're also vulnerable, they have flaws, they screw up. When they show that compassion to the people who've had it, that starts to create that psychological safety, and that starts to open up that dialogue where individuals now play a more important part as co-creators of the new work dynamics rather than passengers in the back seat being led to believe what they got to do.
Very interesting. And that leads me really nicely onto my next question, Vinay, which I'm going to throw at you, about legal basic requirements that a company should employ in providing their employees to make sure that they have a safe working environment, physically, socially, mentally, and whichever perspective you want to look at it from.
So one of the cases I'm doing at the moment is a very interesting aspect to that, is that you don't have a demarcation between home and work life. So you have a situation where, for example, if you're unwell, the employers have been asking, well, you're at home anyway, why don't you just get online? You don't need to say anything, you don't need to take part, but you still are forced into participating when you're unwell. So this situation of actually getting better if you're unwell at home, but of course your home is your work. So a lot of employers are putting this additional subtle pressure of continuing to work when actually the employee is unable to do so. There's also a sinister theme which is going through lockdown, and that is that there is, because there's no demarcation, that employers are forcing employees to carry on work even then when they're not able to. And even if they're not able to, they don't recognize that they're not well. They may be exhausted, they may be physically unwell, but the employers are putting this subtle pressure of saying, well, it won't matter, you're at home anyway. And I think that is something which I'm dealing with in a case at the moment, where the person has had a breakdown, and the breakdown wasn't recognized by the employer. Now, of course, there's an absolute positive obligation on the employee to make sure that they are communicating to the employer as to what's going on. And some employees don't feel that they can do that. And that's the gap. And sometimes people think, well, if the employer doesn't know, how does that implicate them in any legal action? Well, it does. Because if you're putting someone in an unsafe place, I'll give you an example. If there was a great big hole in the middle of the reception, nobody's going to tell you there's a hole. It's clearly there's a hole, and you've got to be very, very careful. The same problem at home. Nobody recognizes there's a great big issue here, and it's the employer has to find out, and it's a positive obligation to make sure that the employer is well and actually the safety of that employee. And it's regardless of whether the employee actually information to the employer. And that's a very subtle point. Previously, you had to inform the employee that I've got a bad back. But now the employer has to make sure that it has enough in place to be able to find out if the employee is well.
But some people, from an employment perspective, are afraid to approach their employers because they feel afraid, they feel sidelined, and they feel that they might miss out on the next promotion or pay rise. And for fear of even losing their jobs, they can't approach their employers. You say that the employer has an obligation to find out about the well-being of the employee, but it's not as easy as that in this day and age. There's still various stigmas attached to this.
You're absolutely right. And this is where I think the cases which are coming through, and these are post-lockdown cases, which have seen this rise in health and safety issues at home. I mean, I'm not talking about, bad chairs or computers which are badly aligned. I'm talking about actually the mental well-being of an employee when it's distanced physically and geographically to the employer. And when you're not actually seeing that employee, if you're seeing that person at the tap room gossip by the coffee machine, you could probably tell, but you can't do that. And so therefore what the guidance is that you've got to have something in place to find out. And that is a really important onus, which I think Ush and Prasha said, it's thrown back, this onus back onto the employees, because the employers were thinking to ourselves, well, if the employee doesn't tell me, the obligation doesn't arise. That is not the case.
Very interesting. So we're learning new things as we go through this discussion today. We're talking about calmness, and we're talking about workplace environments and how we can make the whole workplace a better working environment. And workplace calmness is the title of today's subject on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. And I'm joined today by three very astute professionals, Prash Kotecha, Ush Danak, and also Vinay Tanna as well. Ush, I'd like to share something with you, if I may, and that is that employers don't understand sometimes that they need to also display enthusiasm as much as the employees. And let me put this to you. Enthusiasm and success go hand in hand, but enthusiasm comes first. So enthusiasm inspires confidence. Now, it raises morale, it builds loyalty, certainly amongst employees, from an employer to employee perspective, and it's absolutely priceless. So enthusiasm is, as we know, contagious. Well, it can be. So you can feel enthusiasm by the way a person talks, walks, and even shakes hands and communicates. So is enthusiasm a habit that one can acquire and practice in the workplace? And we were talking about working remotely earlier on. It's absolutely impossible to deploy that if you're going to be working remotely.
Yeah, look, I think it can. We've just got to think a little bit outside the box. And I think the first thing that comes to mind when you said that is to celebrate the small wins. Yeah. But sometimes we can just get so lost in, what is the bigger picture? What is the organization strategy? How many hours is someone working? Has someone put leave in? But rather than those things, why don't we just, do a bit of a round robin, daily check-in, what was your win? And share that. And I think the other way to bring about the enthusiasm as well is to have a little bit more focus on mentoring and buddies as well. So one company here in Australia that they've just initiated, a client I work with, is they've given us a coffee mate. So they allocate at random 2 people within the business where they give you $10 and you go and have a coffee with them if you can, in person or virtually. And that's just to literally spread joy and have a conversation about what's happening outside of work and not talk about work.
And is that confidential between the 2 people, or depending on the depth of what is discussed, it can be shared with other people?
No, so it's not about work. The whole point of it is you're meeting someone at work to talk about something outside of work, something that's brought you joy, something that you're grateful for. And you can do it, whether you meet them if you're in the same city for a walk in the park, you can meet in a coffee shop, you can order coffee and do it over Zoom. But I think that's the small ways to bring enthusiasm back in. Yeah.
It's a lovely idea. I'd like to talk about, if I may, and Ush, I'm going to ask you to respond to this first of all, and that is the mental well-being and health of men in the workplace. Everyone sort of perhaps looks down upon accepting help, and men especially, through their grandeur attitudes, if you like. I'm a man, I don't need this, or I need to put on a front to show that I'm doing okay because I'm a man. Now, in the current workplace and society, 21st century that we're living in, we're hearing that men more and more these days need some sort of help, mental health help that they're simply just not getting or not acknowledging. I'm going to ask Prash and Vinay to respond to this in a moment, just after you. But from your perspective, in your roles as HR leader and the roles that you've had in HR, what is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think, when I'm coaching in EQ, and we obviously coach men as well, and no, men don't have lower EQ, even though people think they do. So just want to put it out there. And I think what one of the things that EQ Academy and our coaches say to men to seek out that help is, if you are a leader and you've got a male member in your team and they came to you and said they needed help, would you shun them? Would you judge them? 99.9%, if not 100% of the time, these men are saying, no, of course not, and we would offer help. And then my next question to that is, well, why can't the same apply for you? And if you're not well, how are you going to lead the rest of the team? How are you going to look after your family? How are you going to mentor and coach? So have that vulnerability, stand up and lead the way to show that it's okay to ask for help. It has to start from the top.
Prash, it's easier said than done, because suddenly I'm saying, well, hang on, here I am. I need some help, please. It's embarrassing.
Well, that's the old paradigm. It's what many men are entrained or conditioned to feel and think, and therefore they won't speak, as Ush rightly points out. But here's the thing. A lot of the people that, Ush and I work with, and, a lot of the clients I have at Stress to Success, through Stress to Success, are individual male business owners or CEOs or executives of some sort of C-suite within their organizations. And one of the most common threads that I find is that they are vulnerable, they do have challenges, and they do find it hard to speak to people. And one of the ways we've navigated that, because I'd like to share this as an idea, is to create men's masterminds. So the idea of the mastermind is that men come together, trusted men within that organization come together, they create their own unofficial group. Kind of goes back to what Ush said. This is not on company dollar, this is encouraged to be an off-plan thing. So men form their own mastermind groups, they come together and they bring in people within that, and that mastermind is then used to speak about stuff where people are able to open up. And it may be as small as 2 or 3 people, but what that does, it starts to create that psychological safety and talked about earlier. It starts to create the acceptance that we can table the conversation. One important point to note is that generally superiors aren't involved in that. So it's a peer level thing where men can talk to men of what they consider as their own standing, their own level, and they're able to start to open up on that. That can happen in the workplace front, that is to say you could fill it with your work colleagues, or, and here's another great thing, men can just create these masterminds with their friends, wherever they are in the world, right? They don't have to physically be here. I have myself involved in 2 different masterminds with people from around the world, and we come together once a week or once a fortnight, we share, we moan, we can I say that word? We rant, whatever it is, we offload, but then we come up and solutionize. Okay, so what's your stretch? How are we going to do that? And these are great ways to start to do things and take power back ourselves than leaving it to the employer to figure everything out.
It's such a wide subject, and I'm sure it's a subject on its own that we could discuss in future broadcasts. Vinay, taking up from what Ush and Prash has just shared with us, what is your take on this?
So I left, when I spoke just a few moments ago, I left a problem here, and that is this quandary of the employer of having a positive obligation. Now, how does an employer feel that? And I think Ush and Prash are good examples. In fact, Prash was mentoring our staff during lockdown, and this was an active and positive step that we took as a legal firm to say, look, they're all sitting at home. I don't know what's happening at home. I don't know how they are, but we managed to have these sessions with Prash, and we even offered individuals to approach Prash to carry on with that coaching. So this is an example of where the employees can quite easily solve this quandary, and it is a quandary that has got an obvious solution. You have to be there to offer that service, and a lot of employers have really gone out of their way to use the services of the likes of Prash and Ush in such an incredibly positive way. And I think it's the first time that people have recognized, not just because we're at home, but also in the workplace, this need for coaching, this need for positive help mentally. We all want to take a pill. We all want to take paracetamol when we're in pain. But what is the paracetamol? What is the thing that we need to actually be able to deal with this, I think, quite a pernicious issue?
Indeed. Prash, if I said to you, work has become home and home has become work, how can we maintain that balance and the stress levels from both environments? Because they are high. We're working from home. We're surrounded by the same surroundings. We have no social interaction. But at the same time, the pressures of working that, and we did touch on this earlier, having that work-life balance, how can we balance that out, the stress levels from both environments?
Yeah, great point. And that problem still pervades many people's experiences in the daytime. So a couple of things. Number one, especially in the home situation where people are living together and you're kind of stepping on your toes, it's important to go and either create a area that you can call your own,
Yeah.
or share that area and slot in and slot out. So this is the excellent opportunity that we can all do, even if you're confined in a small space. Share that space, go out, and it's almost like time sharing. Time share your space at home, share it with the other people, so that, and make sure that those other people are not then around at that time, so you're not stepping on each other's toes, you're not kind of cramping each other's styles. People feel free to express. Secondly, go and make sure you do your regular breaks and check-ins. So Vinay made a very good point earlier that people are sometimes working super hard from home, harder than even in the office. That's a great thing, but that's not a badge of honor, right? Let's just be real here. You don't wear that as a badge of honor, because the price you pay for that overperformance is cognitive defeat and depletion and all the other things that happen. Not to mention that, Ush is the emotional intelligence expert here, but you start to then snap and shout at the people around you. You start to dig into your workplace. So it's key, therefore, to ensure that you're doing not only physical exercise, but mental exercise as well. So you need to refresh, take that break. So regular disengagement from the workplace is important. Demarcating your work hours, and then having do not disturb signs at home to say, guys, for the next 4 hours, I'm not around. Even though I'm at home, I'm not available to the family. Next 4 hours is work. Advising your employers and your staff, your colleagues, your team, and managing their expectations as well, that to say, look, guys, this is my situation. Just know that for these hours, in these days, in this week, I'm not going to be around. And if you maintain that, if everybody in the workplace give that expectation management on a real-time, weekly basis, you go and manage your expectations back with your family members or your housemates. And thirdly, manage your own expectations and energy by taking breaks, physical, emotional, taking breaks, spiritual meditation. Then you start to restore that balance. Then you start to perform better at work, and then you start to pull back, take a break, and be a better person for your colleagues and for your flatmates or homemates.
So very well put. On the Great Big Indian Wellness Show today, I'm going to ask you, the three of you, to conclude by giving us your 3 tips that you can share with our audience who are listening and watching today, and give them something to take away from our discussion, apart from what you've already shared with us in such a big, valuable way. Usha, first of all, give us your 3 top tips that you can share with our audience.
Yeah, I'm going to say the first one is beware of your inner critic. So we all have that inner voice that speaks to us. Sometimes we listen to it, sometimes we don't. When we're not feeling great, it tends to shout. So do listen to what that is. Second one is, practice mindfulness in whatever way that means for you, whether that's, a little bit of time out, go for a walk, whatever, but make it a daily habit. So I think the more mindful you are, the more you can check in with yourself. And I think the third one is have someone that you can talk to, someone that that's got your back without judgment. And you can have your little bit of a vent to when your, warrior mode is low.
Vinay.
For the employers, make sure you have policies in place to have a positive impact to your employees who are sitting at home. And coaching, mental well-being classes, individual coaching is really important. It fills the gap, it ticks that box. For an employee, be mindful that you have to notify and to make sure you keep your employees informed of your health, and to make sure that you have emails to show that if there's too much work, if there is a pressure, that is somehow communicated. That communication will give you the edge if you were to take the matter forward.
Prash.
Number 1, if you're a leader of any kind, even if you're not a manager, embrace the art of self-leadership. Get into self-leadership. Understand how your brain ticks, how your mind ticks, and build that self-awareness. In other words, as Ush rightly says, she's the EQ expert, build your emotional intelligence, become a better leader for yourself. Internally, you'll be a better leader and a person to hang around with for your employees and your colleagues. Secondly, the importance of portion control. We all think about food as the thing that we need to diet on, right? Our diet of food is important. But actually, I want to talk about the other types of stuff that we consume and eat through our eyes and ears. Monitor what goes through your eyes and ears, because that massively impacts the way you show up in the world and how you perform and the results that you get. So watch what goes through your eyes and ears. Consume better stuff through your eyes and ears. Podcasts, so many stuffs. And number 3, unplug yourself on a regular basis and go inside. Look at what challenges and self-limiting beliefs that you have. Work with a coach. There's plenty of us around. Find a coach. Work with them to tackle your inner demons, those tigers that roam the mental jungle of your mind, and clear out those old baggages and limiting beliefs that are preventing you from making that move to the next level. Those fears that are holding you in this lockdown state. A lot of people are consumed by fear. Fear is arguably a worse infection than the pandemic, some will tell you. So work on that. That will clear. When you clear your fear, you start to address your stress. When you address your stress and clear that, you start to become more peaceful. When you start to become more peaceful, then you can get happy. And Tony, by the way, there is a meditation happy to offer people on the stresstosuccess.co website. Go pull up the free meditation. You can do that every single day.
I thank the three of you for being with us today and giving us your valuable time and fantastic information that you've shared with us today. Thank you for being with us today on the Great Big Indian Wellness Show. Thank you.